this is a pointless exercise, but just before we started, I just worked out the most stupid fantasy figures. I thought, let's just go through it. So there's roughly 32 million privately owned vehicles in the United Kingdom. And if they were all electric, and they just say, for the sake of argument, they were all plugged into bi-directional chargers, and the National Grid had the ability to take out 1 kilowatt hour, so 3 or 4 miles range from each car. That is 32 million kilowatt hours, which is 32 million, which is 32,000 megawatt hours, which is 32 gigawatts of power, which is more than the UK would consume at an average time of the day. So they could power the entire country, and everybody in the country would lose 4 miles range in their car. It's ridiculous, and it's never going to happen, but that gives you an idea of what is happening, because one of the basic facts I just want to mention before we start, like, when I heard this, I thought, this is ridiculous, it can't be true. Our cars that we all own, or lease, or bought second-hand, or borrow from our auntie, are dormant for 95% of the time they're owned by any individual. So they're not doing anything. And what we're talking about here, vehicle-to-X, as we're going to call it, because it's vehicle to whatever load it might go, could be a way of using those vehicles when we're not driving them. And that's the bottom. I just want to get that bottom line out there. We're joined by a very, very esteemed and knowledgeable panel. So right next to me is Jim Hunt, who is the Managing Director of V2G. Next to Jim is Claire, who is a Mobility and Energy Advisor and who's worked for just about everyone on the planet, and she is effectively the leader of the known world. I think that's accurate, isn't it, Claire? Just about. Next to Claire is Mark Potter, who's the... next to Claire is Paul. Sorry, Paul. You're not in the order that my thing is, and it's very confusing for an old man. Next to Claire is Paul Kirby, electric van man. And you know all about electric vans and fleets of vans that get plugged in and da-da-da-da-da. And next to Paul is Mark Potter, who's the CTO of 3TI. So can I start with you? Oh, were you going to give a round of applause for them? Yes, come on. My worry is when I follow Imogen, when she's done a panel, she does it so well and so professionally and remembers everything. And then I come out and go, anyway, we got through the first bit. Mark, can I just ask you, can you just explain those basic differences? What the difference is between V2X, V2G, V2L, V2H, all those V2s?
Sure, no problem. So V2X is just X being something, and the kind of key technologies, a lot of people who've got electric vehicles here today may have V2L in their car, vehicle to load, and that's what you call grid forming. It's creating a 50 hertz main signal from your car that you can use to run a kettle, run a toaster, but it's not actually connected to the grid. Once you go past V2L, you're then into grid connected. So you've got V2H, vehicle to home, V2B, vehicle to building, you've got V2G, vehicle to grid, and then you've got things like vehicle to infrastructure and a few other acronyms. There's also a new one that you'll start hearing now called vehicle to vehicle, V2V. But this is really about where the energy ends up. So if it ends up in your toaster, it's a V2L. If it ends up in your home or in your building, it's a V2H or V2B. If it ends up kind of reaching the grid, or being controlled by the grid at least, then it's V2G. And if it ends up just in the vehicle next door to you, then it's V2V.
Right. That's a good explanation.
Can I just add one?
Yes.
Sorry to interject. Because something we're working on is a 4-letter acronym.
Ooh.
V2 micro G, vehicle to microgrid. So, sorry to throw that out.
No, there we go.
It's exciting, leading-edge technology.
Vehicle to microgrid, so vehicle to a local area grid, like a few houses or a few buildings or a few offices. Right.
Or even vehicle to nano-grid, which is that's tomorrow.
Oh God.
Vehicle to home. Sorry.
Vehicle to nano-grid. But Paul, with a fleet of, what obviously makes sense is if you're a company and you've got 40 delivery vans and they're all electric, and you've got to charge them at night, and you've got to charge them. But you can actually sell that electricity. Or can you? I mean, is that something that's starting to happen?
Well, starting to happen, I think there's,
it's definitely on the agenda. People are wanting to do this. There's a fabulous example of this in London at the moment. These are refuse collection vehicles, so they're bigger vehicles, but the principle's the same, because effectively at sort of around midday, when the bin lorries have done their duties and collected all our waste, they basically park up 12.3 megawatts of energy.
Right.
And they're only using, say, 30% of their 300 kilowatt hour batteries, so times 40. And then they can send that energy back and forth. And the great thing is it's actually next door to an energy reclamation centre, so the rubbish that then gets energy reclaimed from it all could then go to the grid. And so it's a theoretical possibility, and the same with van fleets that are going to depots. You know, a lot of those van fleets are only using half of their daily energy, so you're left with 20, 30, 40 kilowatt hours of energy that could go back into the grid, and you could and should be able to export that energy and mitigate the cost of moving to electrification in terms of the chargers and all of the other costs that are associated with making this transition. So it's a really very, very, very credible opportunity.
Yeah, and Claire, I mean, one of the reasons it would make a lot of sense in this country is because of the variable cost of our grid electricity. And I talked to someone in France last year who goes, there's less dreaming about this because their electricity cost is fairly flat and constant because they're mainly nuclear. But I mean, could you just explain that, how that could work, that you could buy electricity when it's very cheap and you can sell it when it's very expensive?
Yeah, so the way that grids work, and each country has a grid, and that grid might be connected to other grids, is it has to stay in balance. So to keep it sort of as non-technical as possible, we need that grid to stay in frequency balance. And if it starts to move above or below that frequency that it's been designed for, then we need either more electricity to come onto the grid, or we need it to be taken off and stored. And so when we think about how you incentivize anyone that has somewhere to either put energy or someone that can make energy or export energy, it's price signals. So it's literally a trading market. And so those signals come out and then people respond to them. And in the old days, where our grid in the UK was about burning stuff in one place in a hub and then pushing it out the spokes, it was about big heavy industry being able to respond to those signals. You know, can the steelworks turn up a bit? You know, can you turn the paper factory down a bit? Whereas now, each of us in our homes can start to be part of that. So we can start to charge our cars overnight, for example, because our utility suppliers are getting a signal from the grid. There's loads of wind, energy's super cheap. Actually, some of you might be. Is anyone here on Optimus Agile tariff? So plunge pricing, right? So sometimes it goes negative, and that's the price signal to say, charge up, use some electricity, because we've got to get some of this energy off the grid to stay in balance. And so actually the UK is a brilliant place to be kind of innovating in this sort of way, building solutions, services, integrated technology to respond to those grid signals. Now in France, they've got loads of nuclear, and so their grid is sort of less dynamic, and they don't have as advanced, they do have some grid signals, but they don't have as advanced and sort of exciting array of different grid signals. But other places to keep an eye on if people are interested in this, and this is like a new thing to you and you want to do a bit more sort of reading, is Texas has a grid that's called ERCOT. It's completely isolated from the rest of the US grid.
It's
completely isolated, and again it has this swings of pricing because they've got lots of generation in the north, lots of industry in the south. California's another really interesting grid, Australia's a really interesting grid. So there are lots of other places sort of popping up that have this ability to trade energy, and that's where V2G and then V2X really starts to get interesting.
Yeah. And Jim, I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, I've heard about this for many years, and it makes so much sense when you first. It didn't occur to me for a few years after I'd got an electric car. Oh, I could use some of that electricity when I don't need it for the car. You know, and immediately it's a light bulb moment. You just go, oh God, that makes so much sense, but I haven't done it yet. You know, so can you tell us what some of the barriers are that we've had to deal with in the past? But in quite not too much detail.
Yeah.
I know this is a favourite topic.
$64 gazillion pound euro question.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll be interested to know what some of the rest of the panel think. But it's just taken far too long. You mentioned the dream, if you like, at the start.
Yeah.
All these EVs running around British roads, world roads. Why isn't V2G doing more than it has already?
Yeah.
Claire knows a bit more about the Octopus trials, but there's been 2 big trials funded by Innovate UK, Octopus one and the OVO one. We've actually got in our little car park in West Devon, Indra DC vehicle-to-grid charging station, but we use it with the Octopus tariff, responding to the sort of signals you mentioned. And now, why isn't the whole country doing that?
Yeah.
One reason is that DC vehicle-to-grid has started with the Nissan Leaf and the EMV 200. Maybe we can come to that. It's very expensive. I'll start getting technical. The inverter that converts the DC from the traction battery into 50 hertz to power the house or whatever is expensive. If you've seen them, it's a big
box.
pile of kit. And Innovate UK funding helped, but after that, things went very quiet.
Yeah.
Do you know more why that is, Claire?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to steal Robert's thunder as the chair.
No, please do. No, please steal all thunder. Sorry. No, that's fine.
It's quite good actually. Maybe we'll kick it down the line as well, because I think we're all involved in different ways. So I think where we're at right now is there's a lot of pent-up demand from both like individual customers and businesses for these solutions. I mean, I'm assuming that everyone here would like V2G. Hands up, who would like V2G?
Yeah, that's fairly comprehensive.
Keep your hands up if you have V2G because you were a power looper or you were a spurious trialer. One. I see one. One, two. Maybe I should be one, I said. So there's a lot of pent-up demand, and actually, standards are coming, and I know it's something that Jim works on a lot. Mark's involved in a lot of that thinking as well. So the standards are coming. The grid permission route is there. This is specifically the UK now. Charger manufacturers are ready. They will follow whatever the vehicle manufacturers do. Ofgem are really keen. Desnes are keen. Like, everyone's really keen. But it's the V in the V2X that we're all waiting for.
Yeah.
So I think the exciting thing is that, V to L, what Mark mentioned, like a lot of those vehicles that have V to L, the ones that have a plug socket, ostensibly, a lot of those are ready to do V2G, and I know, and I will defer to Mark. We've already spent quite a long time this weekend talking about this. It's about AC versus DC.
Yeah.
So upgrading vehicles with the right firmware to make it happen. But I think it's about business models, just to make it like a bit non-technical for a minute. And that's the vehicle manufacturers have got to work out how do they fit this into their businesses? How do they make money out of it? How do they make sure that the risk of doing it is minimised?
Yeah.
So I think we'll start to see vehicles like maybe the Ford Explorer, which will be DC. We'll see the Renault 5, which will be AC. Volvo's massive wagon, I can never remember what it's called, the EX90, I think is anyone know?
Oh, the big SUV.
Will be AC. So these are vehicles that are coming in the next probably 9 to 12 months. But those vehicle manufacturers have still got to bring them. I don't know, Mark, Paul, if you want to pick up the thread.
Well, I consider myself the village idiot in this context, because I'm the person that really doesn't know any of this technical detail, but kind of understands the fleet side of it. And the fleet side of it is quite simple, right? We would want to be able to take advantage of this to minimize the impact on business, as long as it didn't impact productivity and other elements like that. So I know that there is concern around batteries, but in terms of how they're done, but it's concern that is probably mythical, and we can manage that. And at the end of the day, we want the technology in the manufacturers. The manufacturers are trying to hold on to some money in all of this.
I'm going to butt in and say, do you think if a big fleet said, we are going to stop buying your vans unless you bring this feature, that would be enough pain on those van manufacturers to push it forward faster?
Yes, potentially, but the challenge is, what do they buy if they can't? But if they choose not to buy this big number of one type of vehicle. So we've got a vehicle outside in the commercial vehicle zone. It's the Iveco E-Daily, that you can take 50 kilowatts EPTO, so power all of the stuff that you would do beside the road, which is fantastic. So in theory, we've got the ability to push that then into the grid potentially, if we can get the right technical bits. But that's where my level goes. But the same thing. What's also good? There's a vehicle in America, the Canoe. Now they're saying that we are coming with vehicle to grid as standard from day one, and they talk about the democratization of energy, which at this point I'm going to pass to Mark, of course, because I think these are the elements that we need to solve, and if a manufacturer comes with a new idea and says, actually, we're not going to try and restrict it and not going to try and hold on to the capital advantage, the money in this proprietary software or whatever, and it becomes more open source and more free, then I think we're in a better state.
Yeah, over to you, Mark.
It's like a hospital pass. Good luck,
So,
Mark.
yeah, I think now is a good moment to talk about AC versus DC.
Yes.
Because it's all about D in my world. And actually, you talk about democratisation. To me, there's three things. You've got decentralisation, democratisation, and decarbonisation all go hand in hand. And for me, DC is one of the enablers that gets us to that mass market huge opportunity that Robert, you mentioned at the beginning of, of the session. So, for those who don't understand the kind of the lingo, obviously the grid is always AC, so it's always going to end up in AC, but it's what comes out of the vehicle is when we're talking AC. AC means, AC V2X means that the vehicle is generating the AC waveform that goes onto the grid. DC V2X means that you're taking the vehicle out of the battery in DC, and then the inversion is being done on the wall box, on the charger, on the infrastructure side. And that's really the difference between AC and DC. Now, the challenge getting to AC, there's lots of challenges. There's challenges around regulation. There's challenges around the fact that you've got to have extra hardware on your vehicle that can do that, and some of the regulatory challenges there around the ability to export power, generating AC waveforms when the grid could be off. There's all sorts of difficulties making that happen, and there's absolutely the long-term direction that we need to have. But OEMs are reluctant to invest in putting that hardware on the vehicle until all of those problems are solved. And one of those problems is absolutely the commercial case, the business case.
Yeah.
You know, is it going to pay for itself? Is that extra hardware on the vehicle going to pay for itself? Can we guarantee this function? Our customer buys this vehicle because it does this. Can they guarantee the customer can actually get that function delivered at their property?
Yeah.
So that's why the OEMs are really reluctant to get that feature in, which is why I think DC is the solution. So if you can put the inverter on the infrastructure and just take it out of the battery in DC.
You don't need to do anything to the vehicle. Then.
There's nothing on the vehicle.
This is where I'm going to jump in. The reason Mark is making, I don't know, like you're smiling at me because we debate this a lot and have spent time today already and yesterday debating this, because actually, you're right, if the vehicles that exist now can be upgraded, that's a massive tick.
Yeah.
But the infrastructure, the charger that would have to go with that is already looking like it's quite a lot more expensive. And when you look at the cost of, when you look at the opportunity of selling energy back to the grid as an individual at your home at the times when it's, you know, preferential to the or helpful to the grid, the money that you make is probably not going to offset the cost of that box for 5, 6, 7 years. So we want to see the cost of the box coming down for the charger.
Yeah.
And I think the other side of it is it's the race to make AC work on the vehicle. Is that's a tier 1 manufacturer challenge of making the bidirectional inverter cheaper and cheaper, and kind of exploring some of these, you know, some of these challenges. So I think it's a bit of a race, and I think it's an and, not an or.
Definitely an and. Definitely an and. And the key with that point about the wall box being expensive, okay, it is cheaper to put the hardware on the vehicle because you've already got a charger on the vehicle.
Yes.
But it's still costing money on the vehicle.
Right.
The infrastructure charger is going to be more expensive than a vehicle charger. But an infrastructure charger could be charging 5, 10 vehicles in a week and using that capability all week round.
Or even, I mean, can be charging fast. So some of these markets, these energy markets, if you can export like quite a lot, quite fast at a certain point, that can be very lucrative versus charging maybe not as much from each vehicle, but over a longer time. So DC lends itself maybe to the former, and that's where the bigger vehicles like the bin lorries kind of can come in.
And that's where I'm thinking. So manufacturers like to work at scale. They like to work at scale and certainty. And if we're selling to an audience of consumers, we'll have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different ways of doing things. People will be parked on the street that won't be able to do it. So the equipment could be deployed in a situation where it isn't used.
Hang on. I'm just going to say Utrecht. Give me that.
Utrecht.
Yeah, we'll
I
come back to
haven't mentioned Utrecht yet.
All right,
Can I say Utrecht as well? Because we've...
Yeah, so
I'll say Utrecht as well. I don't know why.
In Utrecht, they drive solar.
Yes, they drive solar, yeah. We might mention Utrecht, but the other one I want to mention is American school buses, which we've just I've done a couple of interviews about them. Really remarkable case they've put together.
That's it exactly, Robert. Is where we've got the opportunity to do one thing over many vehicles,
exactly,
and have one set of protocols, like the Lammerway example with the bin lorries, like with buses returning to depot every night, and all of those kinds of things. We get BT OpenReach, or they're just OpenReach now, just so anybody knows. OpenReach, I've got 4,000 vehicles that they can park in depots, and similarly with the Royal Mail. All of these vehicles are going back to base, and then they can send that energy, and you do one thing, and it deals with a lot of things. And then it gives opportunities for everybody to access that, because the manufacturers have developed it with a low cost in mind per vehicle over many.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just briefly mention Utrecht as counterpoint to the DC proponent? So I'm excitedly looking forward to the arrival in the United Kingdom of the Renault 5 E-Tech, which is promised, whether it delivers, early next year, AC full vehicle to grid. So we've been talking to Robin Berg from Utrecht for a very long time. We were at the launch of the modified Renault Zoe in Utrecht. We've had one of their charging stations in our car park since Silverstone. I don't know if you remember when Robin Berg said, I've got a bi-directional AC charger in my boot.
Yes.
It's now in our car park in so I can see it's got to be both.
Absolutely.
DC rapid charging and AC slow discharging makes a lot of sense from.
Can I just explain just further? I mean, my grasp of this is minimal, but I mean, just so that we really understand, an AC charger is what you would use at home. It's the smaller cable, it's the Type 2 connection. It would only deliver probably at maximum 11 kilowatts, something like that, 7 to 11 kilowatts. But actually, if you look at what your house consumes, that is more than ample for everything you do in your house. So you could have your cooker going, you have your tumble dryer going, you have all your lights on, you have your telly on, and your car could power that without freaking out. And that's where that kind of appealed to me when I first saw that was possible, which was in Utrecht. They have an experimental thing with a car sharing scheme where they have, I don't know how many now, it's
well, they've got 700 on-street AC chargers, and they are special chargers with special software.
That are bi-directional.
Which is bi-directional with cars that have special software. But this year they're going to be putting in more chargers. They have 2,500 in total. And they assure me, Gretjan, who is the project manager there, assures me that they will have production vehicles, although he wouldn't tell me.
Yes, they won't say which.
You filmed there, that's why I was saying, you filmed there, you've been there.
Yeah.
You should tell the story about the cars going to see the cars in the car park.
But yeah, no, that's very briefly, it's, we went to this big underground garage which had about 40 Teslas in it when we went there, and when they opened it, when they launched the event, the mayor was showing dignitaries from, I think, some places like South Korea and America and all over the world, and they'd all come to see this amazing car sharing scheme. And they've got Renault Zoes and all manner of different cars, but they do have a lot of Teslas. And they went to the garage with the big doors, and she said, and in here we have our Teslas. And they went back, and there was no cars in there. It was completely empty, and it was a bit of a faux pas. They hadn't checked beforehand in the rush to entertain everyone that all those cars had been pre-booked. And when they looked on the map to see where they were, they basically defined the south coast of France. All these Dutch people had driven to the south of France on holiday. It was in the summer. But it kind of gave that is really there. We're talking more about car sharing because Tesla don't do bi-directional.
Not yet. But it got talked about at Battery Day, right? Has anyone seen Elon talking about it at Battery Day? I mean, reluctantly, right? And it's interesting for Tesla because they've got this Powerwall business, which is about grid and selling
you more batteries.
And yet folks are like, but what about bi-directional? He's like, I don't want to talk about bi-directional. I've got this Powerwall business. However, I'm assuming that I'm amongst geeky friends. So anyone see, like on the Cybertruck, there are like extra features. Yeah, someone here, like, there's extra features on the Cybertruck which tend to look like it might have optional added extras that will come. Maybe bi-directionality, maybe wireless charging, maybe definitely range extender batteries. So weirdly, the Cybertruck, although there's a lot of not love for it. It has really interesting features.
Amazing technology. And also, I mean, I just don't want to go on because it's sort of old. It's an old story, but when they launched that F-150 Lightning commercial, you can still see it's on YouTube at the Super Bowl. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And that was from talking to Jim Farley, who's the CEO of Ford, who were trying to get to come to one of our shows one day. The sequence in that of a man at his house and the lights go out in the city and he gets his smartphone out.
Very rough and tough in America.
And he just, big tough guy, and he just goes shoop like that, and all his lights come back on because the power's coming from his truck. He said, we reckon that sold 150,000 units, that one moment. He said, the stuff where they're driving up the mountain, kicking up dirt, who cares? You know, we've done that before, but you can't run your truck off a diesel F-150. You can't run your house.
And I think that's what brings it back to, you know, why is V2G and V2X, why is it so sexy and exciting? And I think there is that element of like energy resilience from your vehicle at your home. You can power your home from it. And I think certainly in places where the grid is not very resilient, and you do get lots of blackouts, like it's just an absolute light bulb moment. And like you say, it totally sold out their waiting list. They had to close the waiting list off that one 30-second ad.
And what I didn't do, and I'm really bad, and Imogen would have done this, and so would Helen, and so would Jack, and everybody, was to mention that you could ask questions, because they've got microphones there. So if anyone has got a very simple, because we've nearly run out of time, a very simple question to ask. Oh look, there we go, so you let us know, thank you.
One thing you can do easily to get vehicle to load to work for you is to get a house battery, small little house battery, get a MG car, any of the Chinese cars, because they've all got vehicle to load with an AC supply of about 3 kilowatts, and just connect the power from the car to the inverter that charges the battery, and you've got power forever.
Yep, you need a 3-pin.
Not the grid, but you've got power forever.
Yeah, you need a 3-pin to a commando socket. And then as long as you've got a commando socket into your battery, and your battery is grid tied, and you've got
there's quite a few safety issues.
Microgrid, home microgrid, right? Home microgrid,
As I was saying at the start, an important 4-letter acronym, vehicle-to-microgrid, and that's basically what our question
I've got an MG, I might find a bit of wire.
If I can just get techie briefly, it solves some of the AC problems where you need to get the inverter in the car certified by the ENA in the UK.
And things like circuit breakers got to be bi-directional. You've got a G99, there's lots of challenges there.
But you still need a G99 for the battery. Sorry, this is super technical. Sorry, anyone who's here for like the vision.
Different challenges. And microgrids is a really key message there, and it addresses some of that inverter cost challenge. So the most expensive part of the inverter is the AC stage. And one of the things that Jim mentioned about the microgrids is if you have a DC microgrid, then actually a lot of the energy transactions can be done DC to DC rather than DC to AC. And when you're looking at banks of chargers, fleet environments, when you're looking at lots of vehicles together being aggregated, a small percentage of their battery being put together with all those other vehicles, and you do it DC with a single inverter, it can have a big impact on the overall system cost, which is why microgrids are so important.
So you're not trying to you're not converting anything from DC to AC. You're using it as DC all the way through.
As much as you can. But car batteries are DC, storage batteries are DC, solar is DC. Okay, if you put an AC inverter on every single one of those, you're introducing a lot of cost
and wasting energy.
And if you can move it around DC as much as possible and do as little AC as possible, then you can bring that overall system cost down in a multi-vehicle scenario. If you've got a single vehicle, you can just make sense harder.
4-letter acronyms rule, okay?
4-letter acronyms rule, that's a good one. We've got time for one more question, yes sir.
As I'm the owner of an original Leaf, one of the few vehicles that actually do support vehicle-to-grid, I've been eager to have a vehicle-to-grid system for years now, listening to yourselves, but the problem seems to be the chargers, as in you can't seem to buy them. When do you think this is going to happen, and will they bypass cars like the Nissan Leaf that require CHAdeMO and go straight to CCS.
So
which no one seems to support at the moment.
Real soon now.
What you've just done is get a stick and walk up to a beehive and jam it in.
Well, no, so, let's see. Is your Nissan Leaf after 2013 model?
It's 14, so yes.
Okay, so it definitely has CHAdeMO and bidirectionality. So I think that the great thing is about those vehicles, and EMV200 got mentioned as well, obviously that's the van version of the Leaf. Those vehicles will go on forever. I think they'll, if there were to be unfortunate nuclear winter, there'd be cockroaches in Nissan Leafs. And they are bomb-proof. And unfortunately, those vehicles have been discontinued, and that means, and CHAdeMO has not won out in the VHS Betamax race, right, to be the connector of choice anywhere outside really of Japan and some parts of Asia. So the bad news is, from a commercial perspective, there isn't a growing market of bidirectional CHAdeMO vehicles, and that means that charger manufacturers have to be really, targeted with where they put their development funds and their scale-up funds. There are DC CHAdeMO bidirectional chargers out there. I don't believe any will come at scale, but I do think there might be businesses that will look at it as a kind of cottage industry. So don't give up hope, but I can't name anyone right now who is pushing into that space, which is a great shame because they're brilliant cars, and I've listened to these myself. I'm about to buy an Evalia because I love them so much, which is the van car version of the EMV200. So they're awesome cars, awesome vehicles.
There is one manufacturer I'm aware of which is touting a DC CCS as V2G ready. And obviously one of the challenges there is the standards have been a bit slow to come, and the OEMs haven't invested in developing the solutions to those standards yet. So it will come, but it is about 10 years behind where CHAdeMO was. And that's one of the biggest frustrations all of us feel, is how long it's taken to that standardisation, what the interoperability is, and the AC problem you're talking about at the moment, you're talking about changing wall boxes to suit the vehicles, which is not a sustainable future. Okay, we have to have common, consistent standards that work regardless of which vehicle, regardless of which charge point you've got, regardless of which energy flex provider you want to work with, regardless of which home battery and home energy management platform you've got. And that interoperability is still a little way away at the moment.
Absolutely. We've gone 2 minutes, sorry Francis, we've gone 2 minutes over time. Well, I've got one other thing to say before I thank the crowd, which is we are trying to collect positive electric vehicle experience stories with Quentin Wilson over at the Fair Charge stand. If you are happy to be interviewed about your electric vehicle experience, and you can be real, you don't have to lie, if you've got issues, to express them. But we know that there's a lot of people who are very happy with electric vehicles, and we're always on this sort of very mild journey to try and counter the colossal, well-funded torrents of misinformation about electric vehicles and the people who drive them, etc. So if you are of a mind, go to their stand. I think it's stand 84. Anyway, it's a Fair Charge stand. It's over near the entrance. Quentin is there chatting to people. So please do that if you're of a mind to do that. And now, we've now nearly gone 3 minutes over. I'd just like to give a big round of applause to this brilliant panel. Thank you so much.